meeting to order, and thank everyone for attending this evening. Let the record reflect that all board members are present, although Ed is wanting to sit in the audience this evening. Let's go ahead and do the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Review of the agenda. Are there any changes to our final agenda that we received?
Number 3, it had me listed, and it's general fund. Mike Marin's going to address that, and it's grant funded.
Is that the co-op grant?
Yes, through the ESD. And then in the minutes, there was a sentence that just stopped, and got that fixed.
They got corrected in the final.
So Kayla went back and listened to what it was and put those in.
Good.
And then in the PLC one, for some reason in EduPortal, if I don't save it right, it'll send to the previous form. And so we just put an updated form in there, agenda form, that gave you a better update of
And that's corrected in our final?
it. It is, yep. Did you hear that, Ed?
Not really, but it's okay.
There's an updated PLC document in our packet that you received in your final packet that's updated from the one you received on Friday or Wednesday.
So
And
the EduPortal, what I said was, if I don't save it in the right steps, it diverts back to what the previous one was. And so the one that was listed was the wrong form. And so we had the correct one put in. That's the essence of what was said.
Any other changes or additions? Okay, well, this might be a first. We have a sitting board member that wants to speak as a citizen.
There you go.
That limits you to 3 minutes.
What's that?
That limits you to 3 minutes when
Does
you have
somebody ask you a
unlimited
question?
dialogue. You have unlimited time up here, so I don't see that.
Well, I'll try to make it quick, actually. I want to speak to the issue of the cell phone thing that we were talking about. We had that meeting on June 12th where the people in attendance here were pretty upset, and some of the comments they made were to the point. We were talking about bullying. I don't think you were here. And they mentioned that, we do a lot of talking, but there's never any action. And I kind of went with that a little bit, and I'll try to make this quick. I went to Dan shortly after that, or we got together, and I talked about, we really have all summer, because this was June 12th. And I said, we could really go at this thing and do policies and procedures and hit the road on September with a full plan on cell phone usage and social media and all that stuff. And I was adamant in the fact that you can't do this halfway. The bullying on cell phones happens on the school buses, everywhere else. So if we were going to do anything, it should be like a total from beginning to end, from school bus stop to stop. And I don't know, you kind of agreed, I think, to that, but I was very adamant about the timing of this whole thing. We really needed to get going. And one thing led to another. Nothing was done in June, and then it was put on the agenda for the June 30, I think, along with 18 other, or it was one of 18 items, which precluded any possibility of really doing anything significant about this issue. It's an opportunity that we've missed, actually. Here it is August, and tonight's agenda says we're looking for a time to get together where we can discuss this issue. Well, you're not going to get a real plan done before school starts. It's just not going to happen. So I really think that the kids in this school, there's an at-risk thing, there's a threat, and it's not getting any better. The 10 years I've been on the board, it's just been a kind of a creeping kind of a thing coming at us with bullying and incidents at school. We even had, of course, a suicide. And all this is wrapped around this social media stuff. We all know that. And to actually put this, a stop to all of this stuff is difficult. And I don't think the will of the board is up to the difficult part of this. I'm just very disappointed that and we've had opportunities before in
If you
which
could come to a close, Ed, just so I.
help
can
our
listen.
children. And we squandered that. And I think we squandered it again now. And this will serve as my resignation from the board, effective immediately. And I have a letter coming out that will go to all of you and a lot of other people. It's a sad time for me because in reflection, we really haven't served these kids. We're sending them out into a world totally unprepared. And that's a sad thing. That's my evaluation, and it's up for debate among other people, but not me here tonight. So, thank you, and good luck.
Well, I wasn't expecting that, Ed. And I think I agree with a lot of your sentiment. It is an issue.
I'm sorry, I'm not gonna debate or talk about it.
No, I'm just talking to the public. We may have listeners. It's something that we want to work on, and I wish you luck, Ed. It's a discussion point for tonight, so we will discuss it at that point in the meeting.
We do have a meeting set up
Yes.
already
Well, there was
on
a,
the calendar for
we
it.
have it on the calendar. We were gonna discuss if we can make it, and we've had a difficult time just getting a hold of Ed. Next up on the agenda is, we have another speaker, Jeff.
I'm not sure how to follow that. Jeff Estes, I'm a resident startup. I had one topic I wanted to discuss, but a couple of things I just wanted to note. One is, I appreciated Ed being on the school board because having different viewpoints and ideas and opinions is great for a school board and committee. And if we all thought the same, and it would be very boring. And I don't think the board would accomplish as much without having some diversity. So I'm sad to hear him go. It's a complete surprise to me. The other thing I wanted to point out real quick is really how demeaning this 2-minute, 3-minute time period. When you guys only have 1 or 2 speakers, you really should show them more courtesy and respect. People are coming here out of their own time, giving up dinner or chores or whatever they're doing to come down here and speak. And while you have all the time to debate, discuss, communicate, you're giving the public speakers only 2 or 3 minutes. I know council meetings do the same thing, and again, usually it's only 1 or 2 speakers. So I would think, you should be a little more flexible on that. What I came here tonight to talk about, though, was the starter property, as you're aware of. Unfortunately, the county can't do anything to prevent the marijuana retail shop from moving in, and it's well within 1,000 feet of the school property. And so it made me think, well, I know the grounds up there have been used. Debbie and the Arts Council have done some wonderful things and utilized a lot of grant money, and I know the Startup Water Supply also uses those buildings, but I think the thing that concerns me is the property is really being underutilized. We've got some tennis courts and basketball courts and fields in the back, and I keep thinking, couldn't it better serve the public if it was ran and maintained as more of a park? And I don't think it's really the school district or even the Art Council's responsibility to try to maintain that and pay for that. I think that would be something maybe the county could do. So it's just a thought, just an idea, but I really don't think it's the school district's responsibility or the community's taxpayers to be able to have that property set aside just for the Arts Council, just for the Startup Water District. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And I have tried to be flexible. In fact, at times with the time limits, I've let the people that are most in disagreement with the district speak up to 2 to 3 times as long.
Oh, I
So
know.
I appreciate the sentiment.
Yeah.
Next on the agenda is, sorry, get my revised agenda up here. The consent agenda. Any questions, comments on the consent agenda as included in our packet?
No.
So a motion to approve the consent agenda as included.
So moved.
I have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to the financial report, Dan.
Evening, directors. Kind of an abbreviated report, because obviously we don't have an enrollment count in the month of July, so I've just included the property tax statement as I typically do. The fund balance reports, as prescribed, presented to you. Fund 10, general fund, $639,431. You might say that seems pretty low, and keep in mind, again, June is your lowest cash month of the year. You're coming off 2 successive months of low apportionment in the month of May and in June. In July, we get 5% and 6% respectively in those 2 months. In the months of July and August, you get 12.5% and 10% of your annual allocation respectively. So we will see that bounce back up, but June is low. It is our lowest month. Fund 20 capital projects fund, 2.4 million, 2.44 million to be exact. Fund 30, which is your debt service fund, $127,000. Fund 40 ASB, $154,000. And Fund 90 Transportation Vehicle Fund, about $78,000. And again, since we don't have any enrollment, we'll bypass all of those graphs and so forth and just jump right into the exceptions reports. Exceptions reports for salary and benefits, objects 2s through 4s. We're still running actually slightly below proportionate share at 0.4% below. So just, we're kind of been holding pretty close there the entire year. Salaries and benefits have fallen in line pretty nicely with what our budgeted estimates were. 60% of our programs are below proportionate share. Again, the entire district is 0.4 below. We do have a few that we've talked about before. Again, a lot of these numbers have not changed appreciably over the last few months we've been chatting about them. The second one, material supplies and operating costs, so that is one that has changed, and have mentioned this several times, is that we have seen a pretty rapid escalation in our material supplies operating costs. If we go back as far as February, and in February we were 6% below proportionate share in February. Now fast forward to June, we're 10% above. So we've had a 16.5% change between February and June as far as the rate at which our material supplies and operating cost expenditures have grown. This is a couple of things. Number one is obviously inflationary pressures. Everybody else is feeling them. We are not immune from that. And secondly is just typically in summer we will see more expenditures. We have annual year obligations that will be put through for things like software licensing. We have summer projects. We have professional development and things that typically we don't do throughout the year do get put towards summer. But again, that has risen quite rapidly over the past 4+ months. And then if we take all of them and work them together, all expenditures, then salaries, benefits, material supplies, and operating costs, we are 1.4% above proportionate share. So this is the first month that this fiscal year that when we combine all areas together that we're actually above proportionate share. We will continue to monitor things as we go. Obviously we have 2 more months left in this fiscal year, July and August. But at this point we are running above budget projection at this point.
Do you anticipate a change of that rate for the next 2 months?
It's going to be a challenge, Russ, to be perfectly honest, frank with you. Like I said, some of the things are in motion. Some things that are still yet to happen, professional development activities and things like that. Again, those are by and large grant funded, where you get reimbursements for those, but you still have to expend those dollars. Summer projects, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on right now as far as getting the campuses put back together, doing well-needed repairs and maintenance, things such as that are going on that require expenditures for materials and things like that. Even though we're having staff on-site staff to do the work, we still need the supplies, the materials to do the work.
The federal stimulus as a percentage is just, we budgeted less than $2,000 and we're at $57,000. What?
Which
amount was-
break?
It's the last one in the MSOCs.
Oh, sorry, okay. Yeah, again, that's just a coding issue where we had some particular things that were appropriate for that. But as far as the budget was concerned, let's look at both areas. Yeah, if you look at both areas, Russ, I think it's kind of a little bit more indicative, even though it's a little bit off when you look at all areas.
The IDEA up above.
No, if you look at the last one, all expenditures, the federal stimulus, you can see the total budget was 104,000, we've had 151, if you look at the combined.
No, I'm lost where you're at.
On the all expenditures, the third of the three.
Okay.
If you look at federal stimulus, which is next to the last,
Yep, I see.
you can see the total budget between all areas was 104,000, but the expenditure's been 151 that period of time. So you are correct that when we do some of our budgeting, sometimes we may budget things under MSOX and we end up spending it on
I see.
salaries and benefits or vice versa. Typically, if we don't have plans that are very firm, I will put the expenditure authority into material supplies and operating costs, and then we'll make adjustments as we go. But again, we're kind of looking at this on an aggregate level.
Does our current, in our packet, proposed budget for next year take into consideration this potential of a 10% increase over our expenditures if we continue on the path we're on?
What it would be is the impact on that would be on what I'm, the estimated ending fund balances for this year.
So is the estimated ending fund balance that we have in that
Yes.
document?
Yes.
in-
I'm
Assume
making-
we will have negative numbers for the next 2 months further.
What I'm doing is looking at what I'm seeing, I look at our average payables run as far as what we spend every 3 weeks. And then basically multiplying that times the number of pay cycles that we have left, and then also making estimates for payroll. Now, I'm happy to report that we got payroll done early this month, and payroll came in $79,000 below estimate. So we've had a significant savings in payroll this month. There was a variety of reasons for that, but.
Yeah, we didn't pay a couple
No,
people.
well, yeah, it's just.
Sorry.
Sam didn't need to get paid this
Surprises, I won't go into details, there were just a lot of reasons, but it was a good result. We've had months where it's swung the other direction too, so that was nice, but that will help as far as I'll do one more revision or one more projection as far as ending fund balance, but yes.
So you're comfortable that ending fund balance we're calculating for the next year's budget is fairly accurate?
Yeah, it's just under 1.296 million, I believe is where we're at right now. Again, the information in regards to payroll, that was just known today, so that is not reflected in these documents that you're seeing here. So anyway.
Okay.
And then looking out at the fund balance, again, as you can see, August projection, 1,296,199. But if you go down under payroll and taxes, down in the blue section down there under, for July, where it said 2,589,663, that came in at 2,510,803. So that's the $79,000 difference. So that's gonna flow down to the bottom, which is gonna help buoy up your ending fund balance somewhat. So that gives you a little bit of room. We'll go through it, like I said, one more time. Our average AP cycle, as you can see down there, is just over $406,000.
Yeah.
Every 3 weeks, on average, we're sending out about $406,000 in bills. That's in addition to payroll, okay? And as you can kind of look and see how those numbers have grown. Chronologically, you're starting at the beginning of the year and working down to the most current. So you can see there was some large numbers. We had one month with 716,587. Earlier in the year, they were 210, 276, 247, 279. You can see that the overall aggregate size of that has grown, which correlates to the fact that we were underneath proportionate share in February and now we're starting to go above. It's because the overall aggregate amount of expenditures for MSOX has increased dramatically over the past 4 months. Okay. And then just a graphic representation. And then I apologize, the last one, my printer may have run out of paper or something. It's gonna be about 3.7%. If that 1.296 comes in, at that number, it would be about 3.7%. So slightly under the 4% minimum fund balance. The budget, when I talk with you later on this evening here in just a bit, the budget we're presenting for next year does meet the minimum 4% threshold, so.
What inflationary rate did we use for MSOX for next year's budget?
We looked at about 3%. It was not across the board though, because there was, and I'll kind of not pick on Paul, but Paul's area is.
He's close.
In special ed, we spend a lot of money on outside services, okay, as far as service providers. Paul has had some good success in being able to bring in as staff people that were previously paid as outside service providers. So you're gonna see a reduction in payment based on the fact that those dollars have basically moved from one side of the ledger, material supplies and operating costs, over to the other side of the ledger. So to say that we just put a flat percentage and spread it all the way across the board is not an accurate statement. We had to do it on a case-by-case basis.
But those services aren't in MSOCs, are they?
Yes, outside provider payments, so if we have an SLP that we're hiring or an OT or things like that, those are payments or what we call under Object 7 for professional services.
Okay.
So those are on the MSOC side. So-
Outside of professional services, what did we use for? I'm talking books, paper, pencils, bus, gas.
As far as what makes up the.
What inflationary rate did we use for those items?
As for those, like I said, we were looking at 5% is what we were looking at, we had talked about before. But again, 5% not across the board, just because, like in Paul's case, the amount that we're gonna pay for outside providers for his folks next year is gonna be significantly less because we've been able to hire some of those people. So just to go through and just say we just added 5% is not an accurate statement. We really had to look at it on a line-by-line basis and say, yep, this one needs to go up, this one is gonna go down because of external factors and so forth, so. But we have tried to allow for inflation. Now, inflation is mitigating somewhat, it is coming down somewhat, but still up for where we were. That's what I had from that report.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Mhm.
You may be up next. I don't believe I have anybody here for committee or association reports. Surprised you're up next.
Surprise there. All right, so I thought, I did include for you the actual F-195 and F-195F documents, and these, believe it or not, are kind of the abbreviated ones. The detailed one is twice as long as that, but I didn't want to kill that many trees. But what I thought is it might be helpful, I put together a PowerPoint that's up here on the board that kind of encapsulates some of the main points of this, and then I'm certainly happy to answer any specific questions about, numbers. Gigi and I chatted about a number earlier today that she had pulled out, so. Anyway, so up on the board, the 195 and 195F, again, just for those, F means a financial report, 195 is just the number assigned to it, and the 195F is the forecast or the 4-year forecast. That was put into effect about 5 years ago. So, next slide. So the process, again, we had our budget committee began meeting in February, and it was comprised of Dan, Crystal, our human resources, payroll, Anita Bickler, Paul Douglas, Student Services, Mike Merritt for Teaching and Learning, and myself for Finance were the members of that team. And we met, every 2 weeks, every week, and then, as needed, basically, but met a number of times starting in February. Next. The objectives for General Fund, Fund 10, preparing the budget, we had the following primary objectives, again, these are in no particular order: provide resources to address student educational and social emotional needs, address growth related to challenges at this building, Sultan Elementary School, obtain bargaining agreements with both our teachers and our Teamsters. Those are both ongoing right now. Gigi is participating in one of those. And then maintain our minimum fund balance, again, 4% of prior year expenditures. Okay. Next. Challenges. I've been doing, this is my 16th year being a small school business manager, and this was one of the most challenging years in putting together a budget that I have come across in my 16-year career. So what are some of those things? Well, in no particular, again, sunsetting of what we call ARP, or American Recovery Plan /COVID/ESSER, it's known by various different things, but sunsetting of those dollars, okay? Districts, as you know, received a lot of money as we came into COVID. Districts handled use of those dollars in different ways, whether they hired staff or they bought materials, supplies, and operating costs. We did some of both with our dollars, but those dollars are sunsetting. We're getting to the end, we'll have very little of that left next year. Sunsetting of another program which was called Learn to Return funding. It was delivered to us from the state, but it actually was an offshoot of federal dollars, and that is not going to continue next year. So that one's gone. Significant reduction in DNR proceeds, or Department of Natural Resources. We've talked about this, is that our DNR collections for this year, we budgeted for the 22-23 fiscal year $1.2 million. As of the end of June, we have collected less than $100,000 on a $1.2 million budget estimate. So we've had to significantly reduce that down, and we've done so down to $400,000 for next year from $1.2 million, so an $800,000 reduction. Inflationary pressures, we just talked about salaries and benefits, material supplies and operating costs, and then just managing growth. We're in an exciting time, but also a challenging time in that we have growth, which is great, but with growth comes challenges in managing that growth and being able to handle those and expend dollars to add a portable and add some staff and improve facilities to do those things. So while we look at this and we say, yeah, we've got a lot of growth, which generates more dollars, you've got a lot of dollars that are sunsetting also too. So basically what you've done is, in simple math, is you've traded additional apportionment, but you've lost an equal or possibly greater amount in sunsetting revenues and or DNR reductions. So when you look at all of it, you're really not in that much of a better place, even though you see all these additional kids that are coming because of some of these sunsetting revenues. Next. Enrollment, this is just kind of a recap here. Our transition to kindergarten, we used to be called transitional kindergarten, they changed it out to transition to kindergarten. Okay, and it's a new category. It's handled separately. For transitional kindergarten, we've included these students for apportionment reporting as kindergartners. Next year, for transition to kindergarten, they're not reported that way. They're reported in a separate category. So that's why I put that is new. Okay? Traditional, we budgeted right about 2,000. That's a plus. And when we looked at our final AAFTE for 22-23, that was 62.2 above. Our ALE, which is the SVA K-12 and SVO 9-12, is budgeted at 70.5 FTE. Running start 21.9. Dropout re-engagement 12.7, and that gives you a grand total of 2105.1 as far as total enrollment, and those are the breakouts. Okay. Next. Revenues, federal grants, IDEA, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, etc. These are just the different breakouts. Federal, state, local. Okay. State grants, categorical dollars, apportionment, based on, again, we do actual for the months of September through December, projected September through December, and actual for January through August. Then local levy proceeds and direct payments, monies that are given at the counter, food service payments, class payments, things like that. Our DNR proceeds, again, $400,000 for 23-24 is what we're going to estimate. It's down from a $1.2 million budget in 22-23. So that's $800,000 less in resources to work with as of putting the budget together. Budgeting for safety net at $150,000. Historically, we have not done that, but we feel very strongly in conversations with Dr. Douglas that we have basically a textbook situation where we will get those dollars this year for a young man that's receiving some services out of state. And other financing sources, capital projects levies, reimbursement to general fund for tech-related staffing. That's something that's been going on since the first tech levy was started, where we have reimbursement for 2 staff members that is paid for out of that back to the general fund. So total revenues, federal, state, local, and transfers, $39,087,684. Next slide. Expenditures. Staffing, which we talked about just a bit ago, objects 2, 3s, and 4, certificated, classified, and benefits. $31,801,155. It's approximately 81.8% of our budget. Material supplies and operating costs, MSOCs, objects 5, 7, 8, and 9. No, it's not a mission that's 6. There is no object 6 for whatever reason. Hasn't been an object 6 for a long time. Anyway, $6.88 million, or $6,888,111. Transfers, at that again was 17.9%. So MSOC's about 17.9%. 0.3% is transfers, $117,480. Those are transfers out for indebtedness for LGOs. Payments on debt. So total expenditures, adding together those 3 categories, $38,806,746. Next slide. Fund balance. Minimum fund balance policy, again, is 4% of prior year expenditures, or in our case would be $1,465,500. So that's the base number, that's the bottom line, the minimum that we have to come up with. That goes into what's called General Ledger 891. Then we have what's left over would be what's called undesignated, unreserved, or GL 890. That leaves us with $111,637 above minimum fund balance, which gives us an estimated total. If you add the 1.465 and the 111,000, gets you to 1,577,137. And the net change of fund balance for operations means next year, are you going to make money or lose money? You're going to make $280,938. Okay. Next. Capital Projects Fund, Fund 20, no, that is not a picture of our transportation co-op building, but I just kind of grabbed that one. It looked impressive anyway. We're going to complete the transportation co-op facility. We're going to initiate the SCAP, the School Construction Assistance Program reimbursement process for prior expenditures. We've had a couple of discussions on getting that process started with CSG, and we'll get that done starting next month. We do have upcoming this year, the full tax anticipation note, or the TAN, repayment. It's 2.64 million, it was a $2.5 million principal plus interest, gets you a total amount payable of 2.64 million, that's due in full February of 2024. So that's the big thing that's just kind of looming out there in the not too distant future. Impact fee collections, which have been slow over the past 9 months or so, but that's obviously figured in there. And then just cash flow management. That's what the whole name of the game has been for the past year, is managing cash flow. As you get tax collections only every 6 months and you're spending money every month, you've got to manage your cash because you're looking at 6-month intervals before you're getting your next payments as far as taxes are concerned. Next slide. 190, the Associated Student Body Fund 40, just kind of looking at that. Budget worksheets. Unfortunately, I did not receive budget worksheets from all sports groups or clubs. There were some that were just not turned in. So I had to go and make some estimates and build some capacity in for those things. Because what I didn't want to do, the only option would be is I want to avert the situation that we got into this year where we got short on budget capacity as far as expenditure authority. I had groups that hadn't turned them in. I know they're going to want to expend dollars, so I had to do some, build some capacity in there. When they come back, we will have those groups fill out those budget request sheets formally before they're allowed to spend money, but I did try to think ahead and build some capacity in there.
Could I ask a question really quick?
Yeah.
Are they the same groups that you didn't get it from now, that you didn't get stuff in the past?
No, I don't see a consistent people that I'm having challenges with. I didn't get as much at the middle school as I did at the high school. The high school, I got most all of them at the high school, but the middle school was pretty sparse at the middle school, so. Oops, I think we just had a power blip. Kayla, you're.
I didn't see anything.
I can't get the screen.
Are you all right?
It's an aneurysm.
The screen just died.
We might have lost the computer.
And probably our connection.
Your projector just shut off or.
We'll pause for a moment and see if we can reconnect.
You guys want to hear about that?
You guys have to witness, nothing secret is going on.
Oh,
You're a witness.
first time we have rain in a month, you see, and power grid goes blip, right?
Dan, did you pay the PUD?
That's the MSOS.
I know you said we were gonna have to cut back, but come
Yes, yeah. All right.
I don't think we've
I
ever
can
had
cheat
a
off
power
this one
outage
here.
during a board meeting.
I don't
Well, I
know,
have
entire
it
career.
right here.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we needed to talk to certain groups, if it's the same group that's not turning stuff in, then.
You know,
Just for a point of order, can we wait to discuss,
Oh,
just so
yeah.
it's on the record, so.
Dave's probably outside.
Well, I'm texting him right now.
Okay.
I already had asked him.
If we can get back on quickly, we'll resume with,
Are you do screen sharing from there, or are you plugged in?
So I have it pulling up almost, and then this is about to come back on. Just a second. Okay, so I have it on screen. There we go. See that?
can either of you post to our school Facebook site saying we've experienced a power outage, trying to get it back on?
We can, and we're still live, don't
Okay.
At least the audio is.
Okay, good.
The audio's live right now, Caleb?
Dave Moon just told me we're still live, and so I can, I
Okay.
can try that.
Well, at least everybody knows
The
what's
screen
going
that is
on.
coming up, if you have 20 seconds.
Can you continue without?
yeah, I can, will it be shown here?
Well,
I have Dave Moon.
Because unfortunately, I didn't print hard copies of my slides, unfortunately.
Do you want this?
Oh, here we go, okay, we're back. We're back here, perfect.
Sorry, folks, power outage.
you cast it to that, or you hardwired to it?
Good, that's good.
I could pass to it, but we are back up on screen, still live, and continue.
Oh, you just turned it off?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
We're back up on here.
Kayla, why don't you jump back to ASB? I'm not sure I quite finished with ASB. Okay, there we go. So again, ASB, I did not receive budget sheets from all, but I've made allowances for that, so we'll get that work done before they expend dollars. Goal is to avoid, again, the challenge that we had in 22-23 as far as budget capacity, too little approved budget expenditure authority. And that's what happens if you don't have a club that has approved expenditures and all of a sudden they return and they want to start spending money. It's like, well, you haven't built that authority into that budget, so you run into those kind of challenges. And then last, just managing increasing costs and declining revenues. That's just a challenge, been a challenge in ASB for a number of years. As HB 1660 came online and where we're offering a lot more services at no cost to students, as far as ASB cards and sports fees and things like that. Their revenue streams obviously been impacted negatively because of that legislation. Okay, next here. And then finally, Fund 90, Transportation Vehicle Fund. We're going to do a $20,000 transfer is built in there from General Fund to Transportation Vehicle Fund to fund the need of a bus. Charlie's buying 2 buses and he's about $20,000 short, basically, or $10,000-ish, 10, 15. But 20 is more than enough to get him over what he has to do for the 2 buses that are coming. Just an aside here, it says additional student growth could require purchase of an additional bus over and above the 2 that we have, of which TVF would not have resources for that. Haven't built anything in there for it, but just kind of a heads up that all of a sudden if we get a big number of kids landing in an area, we may not have bus capacity to.
So we'd have to have a special session to increase?
Yeah, we'd have to do a transfer, it would have to be a transfer from general fund. I've not built anything in for that, that's just kind of an aside. It may not happen, that's why I've said the word could.
The chances of having to add buses mid-years, I think, fairly remote.
Yeah.
Could happen, but, you know, the growth occurs not in a uniform way.
Right.
And so you generally have capacity on them, but it doesn't, and we're, you know, talking about the neighborhoods we're talking about, we kind of know where the building is. I'd say it's a worst-case scenario, you can increase by a couple hundred kids and not have to
Right.
add a bus.
Okay.
But you could.
Yeah.
It's an outside possibility.
Yeah, not built anything in there for it, just an aside, so, okay, next. And then we move then to the 195F, the 4-year projections, some assumptions. District enrollment, estimated to continue to grow, but at a slower rate as buildable land diminishes. Reduced collection of state DNR monies versus boom years. So 2016 through 18 was kind of the boom years where we were hitting, you know, 1.4 million, 1.5 million, 1.1 million. We haven't seen anything near that. And then limit increases of operational MSOC to 3% going in years 2, 3, and 4. We talked about 5% next year, which is year 1, but years 2, 3, and 4, having it slide back down to 3%. And then estimate salary and benefits to grow at IPD for years 2, 3, and 4. So just trying to kind of plug in there things that we know. Anytime that you're looking out 4 years, again, there's a great deal of uncertainty as far as the numbers that you put out there, but those are some of just the general assumptions. Next. And then summary, just some aside, we went through our review with the ESD and Lori does a great job and pointed out to me something that I knew and I said, yes, I'm going to be making the board aware of that. Our total fund balance has dropped 61.2% since 18-19. That was the McCleary year, you know, we hear about this McCleary year. But since that time, our fund balance has dropped 61.2%. Elevated IPD since COVID, okay, implicit price deflator, has negatively affected fund balance and not all staff are funded. So if you have an IPD of 3.7%, and that doesn't mean that you're funded for 3.7% for every person, because you have unfunded positions specifically in your classified areas. Some of this stuff is repeat from the challenges. Federal ESSER grants are now essentially exhausted. Unpredictability of DNR collections has required scaling back projections significantly from 1.2 million to 400,000. Sustained inflationary pressures are causing upward pressure, calling upward pressure on MSOC expenditures, i.e. fuel, energy, general cost of goods. Growth, currently primarily at this building, will soon begin affecting operations at our other buildings. As these kids matriculate up to the middle school and then matriculate up to the high school, we're going to have similar challenges at those buildings. And aging facilities can continue to be costly to repair and maintain. So, is that the last slide? Yep, that's it. So that's, in summary, basically the key points of this 46-page document and the 195F that is thereafter. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What did you use to indicate or select the amount of our DNR's proceeds. I know they shrunk dramatically over our last year's expectation, but in our new budget, we're looking for 400% of what we received this year.
400,000, not percent.
400%, it was 100 to 400, isn't that 400?
No, he was 1.2 million down to 400.
This year we received 100, and next year we
Oh, I see.
anticipate.
He's saying 4 times as much next year.
Two parts, well, go ahead.
We
Well, I
don't worry,
think-
I'm just curious.
Dan, I mean, I don't wanna, defer back to Dan, but I know Dan keeps in very close contact with some high-level people at DNR and give us ideas as far as upcoming cuts, progress of cuts and things like that. Now, again, when we see those proceeds, it's highly variable depending on the type of sale, or is it done as the sale progresses, it done at the end, when the sale is completed, and so forth. So, Dan and I have chatted about that as far as that number.
So I've got a tool that basically gives you the millage rate. And so it shows all of the various junior taxing districts and what their debt is. In our case, we have 2 levies, capital levy and then the
EPO,
what?
EPO.
Yeah, the EPO levy. And so when I plug in the sale of the board feet, plug in, the various numbers that are there, it'll spit out a number that we get. There's about 8 sales in our area, 4 are active in various spots of that. When the capital levy went into place, and it was about another 30 cents per thousand or something, it actually increased the amount we would get. So I think that 400 is a pretty safe number. Certainly 0 would be a no-risk number.
Right.
For sure.
If we look back at last year at the same time and would have used those same tools, would it have shown us only getting?
950,000.
Yeah, so it was off by
So
a huge amount.
I've talked to people well, no, not that millage thing, because there's parts to this I can't dial into, but I
know it's not,
there's a lot of politics involved in this whole thing, and when I say politics, we've got a number of inactive cuts that if I plug the numbers in, they're gonna generate quite a bit of revenue. What you can't tell exactly when they're inactive is when they'll become active.
and they could be 10 years.
Well, they're contracted, so it's usually only after a couple of years, or they'll extend it, like, it's called high caliber, that is the piece of land that they're building a shooting range on.
Okay.
That property has to be reconveyed back to the Snohomish County, and at that point, it's gotta go through some things. I was under the expectation that would have already happened. The challenge, and I heard this just this weekend, is they can't find anybody to manage it because Snohomish County does not want to manage it, the shooting range, which I understand.
Jeff? You volunteering? I mean, anybody else want to volunteer for that job?
There's a number of different ones, so, certainly that number is up for fair debate. I could show you a 20-year history. Some years we've got, received $1.5 million plus.
Right, well, I know.
Other years we received a couple thousand.
I just don't, let me put this correctly, I don't want it to just be a number that makes us work out to where we have more than 4% in our fund balance.
This 400 was, based on conversation with Dan and I, the guy's name is Kyle Lewis from DNR.
Yeah.
He sends, I'm on the email list that he sends to all their department people, just so I can see the progress in the roads, in the cut. Depending on the cut, some of them they don't pay until the end of the cut, and some of them they pay as they go. And so it's a little bit different. 400,000 to me it is a safe number,
Okay.
but it is certainly less safe than 0.
Yeah. Okay. Glad we didn't try to build a bus barn with Cambridge.
Be sunk.
As far as for other questions,
We were talking about the timeline in which, the growth at SES will affect the upper schools. What kind of a time limit are we talking where we're gonna start to see the same problems that we're seeing at SES trickle into the middle school?
well, I know that it's certainly something Brett, our middle school principal, has participated quite a bit in the CFAC meetings. He's concerned about it. At some point, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, down the road, we're gonna see those kids that are aging out of this building are gonna go to that building, because it's the only middle school that we have, so they're all gonna come there. Again, we haven't seen growth at Gold Bar. Gold Bar, essentially, their enrollment has been flat, pretty much flat for the past 10 years, but certainly.
K through 3 are all well over 100, or over 100, I shouldn't say well over. This year in kindergarten at this school, we budgeted for 119. They're already close to 90, by the time we left school, and One of the things that, you know, has become kind of customary in Sultan is we have a lot of late enrollments. You know, almost in a joking way, it's, you know, look out the window and their friends are gone to school, school must have started. So we need to go. And so when you look up K through third grade, all of them are over 100. Fourth and fifth, you know, next year fourth will be over 100 and fifth will be the one that's not quite yet. This year at the middle school, we had about an even class come in to what left, and so they're actually budgeted fairly flat for next year. What we can't tell for sure is what's the growth gonna be. You know, we always lose during the transitions, 5th to 6th, 9th to 10th, or excuse me, 8th to 9th. And so it'll, to answer your question more directly, Cindy, a couple years, you'll see it for sure.
So 2 years-ish.
Yeah.
2 to 3. We do have the one thing that helps a little bit is, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have some existing space at the middle school right now, a couple, 2 or 3 classrooms. that
Middle
could-
school's the one school that's got a little bit of
A little bit of
space within
capacity.
it. And I will tell you, this kind of plays into why we went with Flow Analytics, that one group, is it's a much more complicated animal today than it's been for us before. And so spending impact fees to have a group that does this kind of thing, demographics for a living, it seemed wise. We don't want to come to the board and tell you we think this many students are going to be here and be way off. No,
So
they-
what is the middle school capacity, if you had to put a number?
Probably another 100 kids, I would say. They have the least amount of portables, but they also don't have much space behind undercurrent. But there's a couple classrooms for sure inside the building, and we could shift around a little bit in the portable space to do it. But it's the one school that has room. Every other school has got quite a few kids outside.
So bringing in 100 kids, more kids to Sultan Middle School is gonna put them at max. Is that gonna be enough capacity, or are we gonna
We-
be in trouble?
So if it all happened at once, we would be in trouble, because we wouldn't be ready for it. But if you look at the bus barn being done in next November and it moving to its new site, you won't have all that back. We just, as a board and a community and a citizen advisory board, need to plan for what we're gonna do back there. Because there's a couple of portables that are being used, but there is more, if you needed to, you could add some space back there. And so, you know, if you look here, we're just running out of room, and we should start lining the back fence with them. You know, and Gold Bar's got quite a few portables going as well. So it's a hard question to answer, Cindy, but I would say as long as it happens over a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, then you can reasonably plan for it. But looking at the students that left and the students going in from 5th grade, we budgeted pretty flat for the next year at that particular school.
Yeah, I think that Dan's right. Once we get 3 full years, 6, 7, and 8 of the students that are here into that building, it's probably in that 3rd year is when you're gonna really start to feel it as far as space is concerned. First
And so
2
when you
years.
look at, you know, how do you do this, you know, thinking about projects and how do you accommodate all of the room, we're trying to figure out a plan that's a couple, 2 or 3 steps, so you don't have to do it all at one time. Meaning if you deal with the enrollment here and, you know, up at Gold Bar, how do you share that, you know, more between those 2 schools, and then tie the high school in, because they, you know, still have 1 lab like they did the last time you ran the bond, and you've got more kids almost outside of the school than you do inside. But the idea is to take the capital levy, and if you gobble that up in a bond, so to speak, you can reasonably raise some money without necessarily increasing any individual's taxes too severely. You know, or if at all. It's just really what's the appetite, what's the need, and there's a lot of factors that need to come in play. If it all happens at once, and it's faster than we anticipate, we're gonna have a problem, but I just don't know how you plan for that. You know, other than we're doing the best we can and understanding what's happening there. But we're also trying to keep it as inexpensive as we can. Because the impact fees, we had almost $2 million, close to it. We're using that to borrow from, so we don't have to increase taxes.
Right.
And we don't have to pay interest on a loan. We're able to pay ourselves back next spring with it.
Right.
So we're trying to be as creative as we can and not impact the community to the greatest extent possible.
Is the Citizens Advisory Council considering changing the, like, not recommending this, I'm just saying, what if our elementaries were K through 4? And we had a 5-6 campus someplace, which would make the middle school then 7, 8, which would increase its capacity. I know the high school is flexing for size too, but there's room there, we own land on the high school property where something could be built.
I think all of those things are fair game. You know, we have talked about what you could do on the backside of the middle school campus. You know, once that room is free, as you know, and this property is we're dialing in on.
We've done some things so that it won't be you and I, but the future board will have some decisions that are.
Right, and trying to do it so that it benefits the community and taxpayers later. You know, meaning that the DNR property is, we're dialed in to get it. We just need the right things to happen. They've approved the sale. We just, our money's tied up, so I have to come up with another way to do it. And that's, I think we've got it. We've got a meeting August 2nd with them. There's just a lot of complicating factors, and it's, you know, I mean, it's a better problem to have than shrinking.
Right.
You know, I think it's easier for people to see that there's a challenge when you have both very old facilities and they're just overcrowded. But, you know, we've talked about, you know, even talked about, you know, if there's a way we could do a property swap with somebody for some different things. There's a number of different things, but we're basically taking the summer off from CFAC just because it's hard to get people together to meet, and we'll start again next month, and we'll come to present to the board, because ultimately, I don't decide any of this, the school board does. And we recommend different things and try to figure out what the best plan moving forward is, because inaction is not gonna bode well down the road, unless things just all of a sudden turn around,
Right.
you know?
Any other questions?
I don't want to cut you short.
The only other, just more of a comment on the clubs and sports not turning in their forms and then expecting that we're gonna extend expenditures beyond what you've accommodated for them. I'm just not so sure we should be doing that anymore.
What I did was, Cindy, and trust me, I struggled with this, you know, as I saw what kind of I had to work with, I struggled kind of thinking, okay, my options would be is to grant no expenditure authority to those groups, and then when they won't go to do activities next fall, say, sorry, can't do a yearbook, can't do
I've heard
what,
students,
can't
not
do
just the
whatever.
director of the program.
So I chose the second plan, which would be, now, there's a caveat to this, is that I built expenditure authority, but I built dollar for dollar fundraising, which means they've got to fundraise $1 to spend that dollar. I just didn't build expenditure authority. So if I put $10,000 in expenditures, I put $10,000 that they need to fundraise or have revenues of $10,000 to match. So they need to be dollar for dollar. So even though they didn't do all the work to get me the detail, I've just tried to cubbyhole some capacity. They will then still need to do that work, demonstrate how they're gonna raise their money and how they're gonna spend their money before they'll be allowed to spend their money.
Right, and I get that. I mean, just going beyond what you've built in. I mean, you took the courtesy of building it in, even though they didn't provide you the information. But for them to come back after that fact and ask for more beyond that, I think that we need to start saying no and saying you need to turn your forms in if you're
Yeah.
gonna need more money, because we have to be able to budget this.
Right.
And maybe a policy that would reflect, I'm just thinking of all the scenarios. Maybe the first year somebody's running something, they get a break for 1 year. But if you've done it 2 years, you know the process then. It isn't like, surprise, when I'm over summer, I need to turn in these worksheets.
I think that we've had a consistency of leadership at the high school. Katie Power has been the ASB advisor for 5+ years probably. Does a really good job. At the middle school, they've had a number of, they've had some turnover in that area, and people that maybe aren't, it takes a while to learn all the ropes on that stuff.
That's what I'm wondering, if it isn't a rookie thing that they don't get it and then.
I'd like to think so.
Maybe part of that is that the building leadership needs to be in communication with them too, saying that these need to be done by X amount of time, and they need to be turned into me, and they also need to be turned into Dan. That way they know that it's being done, and if it's not, they have a chance to step in and talk to them and get it done.
Right.
Do we still have one person, I know Scott did this in the past, for activities, that oversees all of them?
He does middle school, high school as far as athletics,
And
yes.
it's probably on his plate, I would guess. And if you're out there listening, Scott, you're welcome. I think that would be one of those things.
I think that the ASB advisor and Scott typically try to work in tandem, because again, Scott kind of more focuses on the sports.
Yeah.
And the ASB advisor works on the clubs and the classes. One last comment before we leave. Typically, now we're scheduled for a second read/adoption on the 28th of August, I believe it is. So that's what we will do. However, the budget that I bring to you in August might be slightly different than what you were doing tonight, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is that I just finally received this afternoon our bid from Sodexo for next year. And Sodexo is one of our largest, they are our largest vendor. We pay more dollars to Sodexo than any other vendor. We pay approximately $500,000 per year. So I have not it came in literally as I was driving to the meeting tonight. So their fixed cost per meal, I've just got that. Need to look at that compared to what I've built into the budget as far as an estimate and kind of see where we're at. So there's that. We also need to do a little bit more truing up as far as the finishing out our ESSER dollars, as far as commitments that we have towards those. Some are coded to this year, some were coded to next year. Need to be sure that we don't have an overcommitment there going on. So we need to look at that. The last one would be capital projects. I'm doing one more run through capital projects, just because there is so much activity going on in capital projects. Simultaneously, I need to be sure that I go through the projects again, the scheduling of those, the timeframes, and so forth. Capital projects needs just a little bit more work for its
I would say
final
one
form.
more piece to the food service part that we've discussed but don't have any guidance. They had started at the legislature this last year, K-12 free lunch for everybody, ended up just K-4. Both of our elementaries qualify. And so somehow there will be reimbursement for all those meals that currently we're racking up some expenses with, because not everybody's paying. So how that offsets whatever Sodexo does, it's just important to know that there's some moving pieces on both revenue and expenditure side.
Right.
Is it I would like to see those numbers at our study session that we're gonna talk about in our next because instead of getting them on that Wednesday or Friday before the board meeting, if we had that period of time
Yeah.
between the study session, and we don't have to have discussion on it, you can just make certain we get the documents in. So we have them and we can be asking questions for a little bit more time, understanding that there could be tweaking even in that final week or two.
Yeah, typically I would have had all that done, but there's just been a lot of moving parts. Like I said, the Sodexo numbers just came in, but it's interesting, Gigi, that's the one that she asked me about today. We was looking at revenue projections for food service for federal resources, and in 2021, I believe is what it was. It was like $1 million, the actual like $1 million, and this year it's budgeted $550. And the problem was that was during the COVID years. Everybody ate for free. Everybody was being reimbursed. We had lots of revenue in food service, and now we're back to the first full year of free paid reduced, and participation has dropped significantly, and I'm not surprised by that.
Have we heard, is there, you think, motion in the legislature next year to move that further up the grade levels?
What they call universal free lunch is what it would be called. It's very costly, it's a big ticket item to do that. I think it's certainly a feel-good thing, but it's just a big ticket.
You can see the revenue generated just for us, one small school
Well,
district.
and I'm gonna go out there, probably get some of my friends and politicians and say, I think it's a good idea, because we hear so often that kids, one of the reasons they have learning they're not getting the nutrition that they need. And I know a lot of kids, we ate at the high school once this year and went through 2 lunches, and you see kids almost eating nothing, and they need meals, especially when tests and those things come. So I'm a proponent for, providing an education costs money, and they fund all sorts of things that cost tremendous amounts of money that some could argue against, and this seems like an obvious one. So I'll get off that.
Okay, so I will get you any adjustments for the meeting, the 14th?
I think it is the 14th.
14th.
Discussion, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for him?
Nope,
Okay.
answered mine earlier.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Next one I think is quick. Discussion study session date for cell phone social media. We discussed at our last meeting having it on the 14th. Wanted to hear from Ed whether he would be able to attend that. I guess we know now the answer to that question. So is there any objection to having that meeting on the 14th?
I think we
Okay.
checked it already.
Yeah.
And I think that the issue, I don't disagree at all with the sentiments that were communicated, but it's more complicated than
It's very complicated.
me just running with it.
If we have a
without-
room full of parents and a room full of
without
staff,
having
it's going to be very
uniform sort
divided
of
on what the group
plan.
wants to do with this issue. And each, I mean, there's division amongst teachers, some, and there's a whole bunch of division amongst parents.
A lot.
We actually talked about it today in parking lot.
It's a challenge. All right, so we'll have that meeting on the 14th. Next item is approval of the ML co-op contract between Sultan School District and the Northwest Educational Service District.
Just so you know, the ML is a new acronym, multilingual.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's, was the EL program, ELL, so now it's multilingual, as we know that education. So, what you see before you is, an agreement for the, kind of the professional development that goes along with, from Northwest ESD. For the, and I wanted to make sure you did get a change in that. It is not general fund, it's coming out of transitional bilingual program, so the TBIP program, which is permissible, because I just went through the contract again. Can't be federal because that's against it, so we have to do it. So it's a $4,000 cost, I believe is what I saw there, and so it's really, we do this, we've done this when they had the highly capable, we did this, we do it with the science program. We just, this is, when you're a small school district, it's very difficult to have all of those PD options. So our teacher, Brent Bueller, will be attending all of these, but I'll be participating in the, also.
And for the record, the funding is coming not from the general fund, but from,
Transitional bilingual program.
okay.
And that's what it's still called in the state dollars, so TBIP. Another acronym.
Yeah, we need more of those.
Yes.
Questions from the board?
No.
No.
And I'll ask for a motion to approve the multilingual learner cooperative contract between Sultan School District and Northwest Educational Service District.
So moved.
A motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you,
Carries
Director.
unanimously.
Thank you.
Discussion of board planning for PLCs at work. Dan?
So this is one of the items that changed due to the saving thing, the way I was saving it. But I wanted to just make those dates aware to you that there's a couple of different options. It will be taped so that as we go through a board transition with 3 members, that the new board members can, be part of that. You have a real key role. This is a district-wide thing, and I think that in a lot of ways it'll make people's jobs easier, more focused on the things that make a difference. But as a board director, you can, you get to see what's your role in the whole thing. And that chapter kind of lays out in a pretty easy to read synopsis of, how boards handle that. And the way a board agenda will start to go as we get into this a little bit is that the board agenda starts to be rebuilt, where some of the student learning PLCs are what starts the board meeting, and sharing some of that data rather than have it structured the way it's been. And that's one of the outcomes of it, that student learning takes a greater focus of this whole role.
Can we make it a point to, because the first one is before the election, can we make it a point to invite and offer that information to all the people
Yes.
running for those offices, so they have an
Yes.
opportunity to be on,
Yep,
ready when they step into the role?
we can do
They're
that.
already gonna have it.
And the dates are preset, there's nothing, I talked to him about it and said, well, this is just the way it is, and so it'll be taped, but I absolutely can.
Okay.
Make sure and see, and so, once the August 1st primary is come and gone, then
That
I'll
will
reach
never
out to
end.
all of those folks.
Questions?
No.
Okay. Then I'll ask for a motion to approve the board planning for PLCs at work.
It's your turn.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I'm still falling back to the old ways. Next up is secondary policy and 4400 election activities.
So this just takes all of the election stuff that you would find on the PDC's website for directors, school employees, et cetera, and puts it into a policy. And so I think it's important to have it.
We had no questions at the last board meeting for first reading. Do we have any questions after second reading?
No.
Then I'll ask for a motion to approve second reading policy 4400 election activities.
So moved.
You called it in there. I have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Gotta be quick.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. You do have to be quick. Second, read policy 5001, hiring of retired school employees.
You know, back in the early 2000s, I recall the old retirement hire. And this is, I think, just a redefinition of it. So I think it talks about how many hours you can work if you retire, and this goes through 2025, at which time I presume that they'll update it again. And it really depends on the people available in the workforce. At the time, 15 or 20 years ago, there was a real challenge with having qualified people to be able to maintain some of the positions that you had. So I think this just, sort of redefines it in some narrower parameters, and then they'll revisit this in 2025 and see where things stand.
Or until the legislature changes.
Yeah.
Questions, comments?
No.
Then I'll ask for a motion to approve second reading and adoption of policy 5001, hiring of retired school employees.
So moved.
I have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. First reading policy 1400, meeting conduct or business. This one threw me. I guess Gigi requested an addition of this one because it wasn't on our last for future referencing.
I don't remember, but sure.
Okay, Dan?
Yes, so this is a policy that's currently there. It just updates it per the WAC and RCW. And with a changeover in the board coming up in a couple, 2 or 3 months, 4 months, I think it's important to have all of the latest and greatest. It basically, in my mind, sort of captures what was salvaged from the board meeting stuff that we were practicing during COVID, so that it's really clear to everybody as to what happens in a regular meeting, what happens in a special meeting, emergency meeting, et cetera, and then the public notice and how that's all given, and the quorum.
Do you think it goes far enough to include information, I don't know what the RCW was, but talks about when you're having a remote meeting and posting remote meetings just using a remote method or online? Because, during COVID, we were using an online for posting our meetings. I want to make certain our policy reflects what the law does so that there's no confusion in that area.
I think when you go down where there's 2 options, if we on
I saw that.
The first option, I think, is what we need to do, because that one says that we did hold meetings remotely, and now, since we did, we can do that in the future.
Do you think that goes far enough? I was just wondering if it goes far enough to tell people that if it's a remote meeting and there's not going to be a public meet, like you can come and sit in the meeting, that they find out about that through an online form. Because God forbid we have another thing that shuts our country down where people can't come out and see that there's a public posted thing, that we are using an online forum for it. I just want to make certain that that's clear, because there was some confusion obviously recently on that issue.
Well, I think now's a good time to make suggestions if you feel like from a board member's perspective that there's something we should add there. I mean, when I read through these things, sometimes I have to read them a few times to really understand
I
what
get to the right page.
different parts they're talking about.
I get what he's saying. I think the more we can
Communicate.
spell it out,
Yeah.
the better.
I mean,
That's
part of it-
exactly what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah, part of it made sense to me in that if you're gonna have a remote meeting and people aren't going to a physical location, why would you post it on a physical location? And that part makes sense to me. But at the same time, if people don't know that, then need to make sure that we do, and so we can do it. I don't anticipate it happening.
Well, there's a supposition that nefarious activities are occurring when it's just, it's not the case.
And I would put, that it's on, check the district website, check social media, all updates will be posted on these places. This is exactly where you look, so there's no question.
And I agree with option 1.
Yeah.
I just think somehow put some clarity to the fact that just say remote meetings will be announced, and list, the formats will list them, so that there's no expectation that there's a flyer hanging on a building when nobody can go to the building, if that were the case.
I mean, yeah.
Any other ideas or comments?
No?
And we'll let you wordsmith that. I don't think that has to be complicated.
But you're talking about just eliminate number 2.
Yeah, it says choose one.
Option 1.
Any other questions? Okay. Then I'll ask for a motion to approve first reading policy 1400 with the caveat we want a little bit of court changed before we adopt it too.
So moved.
Have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? First reading, policy 5011, sexual harassment of district staff. It seems like we just did something on this one. Is it an overlapping policy? I didn't look at the last time we did this one.
This is
June
district
22.
staff, it's not the regular, just the sexual harassment.
Maybe 2010 doesn't seem that long ago.
22.
Oh, it was 22, so it wasn't that long ago we
Yeah.
addressed it.
We've talked about that before.
Questions, additions? I think I have a note on this one.
I have nothing on this one.
It's pretty straightforward.
No questions. That being the case, I'll ask for a motion to approve first reading of policy 5011, sexual harassment of district staff prohibited.
So moved.
Have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
It seems, I will say, it seems odd that we have to say that we have a policy that prohibits sexual harassment. Doesn't it seem odd that the policy has to prohibit it? Policies for 811 are 2029 animals as part of the instructional program. I know we have talked about this in the past, and service animals in schools. I know we've addressed that in the past, so if you have any questions before the next meeting, make certain they get to the office on those. Policies for 828 are 5005, employee and volunteers disclosure certificate requirements, assurances, and approvals, and policy 5050, which are contracts. So again, the earlier you can let people know, the better we can service those. The one thing I will say is, I thought we were dedicating all of the 814 study session just,
We were, and Paul, you want to address the policy part of that?
The reason on the policy is that we're looking at adding that therapy dog to that, our SLC program.
and you need that.
And we need to, before we can do that, we need to,
Okay. All right, fine.
I'll speak in 2 minutes or less.
That's fine, that's fine.
We're timing you.
We'll squeeze you in.
Little
These
taser to
things,
go over.
they
Yeah.
float, and I want to be able to make us spend as much time as we can on the issue,
Absolutely.
but that's obviously important too. Okay, superintendent's report, Dan, you have,
Yeah, so I've been in contact with Tracy, given her, some time, and we talked today, and I want to schedule that field trip for whatever board members are interested in going and looking at that lot. We had talked about that, a few months ago, and with Charlie, and going out to see that there's a lot right next to the property where we had some trees blow down, and ended up doing damage to their home and their carport and one of their cars, and we had talked at a previous date about doing that, so I'd like to schedule that soon, if somebody's interested in going.
I would be.
I can go.
thank you. It would work great for me if we could do that on a Thursday.
We can do that?
I have Thursdays off. What are the best days
I
for
can be
you?
flexible, as long as I know about it in enough time that I can block my calendar, nobody will schedule me to be in meetings at that
I could even try to schedule it this Thursday. I'll just reach out
time. Let me see if I can do that.
to Tracy, and I don't know if we're 3 board members, if we have to do a
We do.
meeting notice.
They can go, that's fine.
Okay.
I don't have to.
Okay. I'll reach out to all 3 of you.
I'll take lots of pictures.
There you go.
And go from there.
It's crazy.
Well, if we find out we're going to have more than 2 board members, then we just need to schedule, to say that we're having a meeting behind our school and looking at some trees. And we need to announce that 24 hours in advance, of course.
Right now, I only have one meeting scheduled, and it's from 8 to 8:30.
So if we could do it Thursday midday, that'd be
Okay.
great.
As long as it's not raining, right?
I have a raincoat.
Or your rain jacket.
The auction is that day, Thursday, from 10 to 2. The surplus auction.
Yeah, that's,
I think
yeah, that's,
if that matters.
yeah, shouldn't matter, shouldn't impact it.
You'll buy everything.
All right, and update on Sky Valley Transportation Cooperative.
I'm gonna have Kayla just pull up some photos.
It's looking good. I've been driving by
Looking
there.
Yeah,
really
me
good,
too.
within budget, on time, everything's going well. So you can see the metal framing on the inside of it.
Well,
And this is from last Thursday, this particular photo. I think I had sent you a picture of the sidewalk, and I didn't have these other ones at that time. And this is the outside,
well, they
this is
have
the
electrical in,
ceiling.
overhead electricals all in, and sprinklers are in. It's funny, when it wasn't outside put on, it didn't look very big. And then you put the outside on, if you stop and walk up to it, it's
It's big.
an adequate.
15,000 square
Yeah.
feet,
Yeah.
basically.
It's a little bigger than what they have right now.
Yeah,
A little
bit.
nicer.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little nice.
So I think that's exciting for the community and the staff to have a building that is functional and will be around for a long time.
You'll be working out of there a lot, huh?
Yes.
A little nicer.
Do you have any other additional items? We have an executive session for a review of a public employee.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay. And how much time do you think we'll need for that?
15 minutes?
Okay. So that I have 8:15, we'll take a 5-minute recess after we adjourn this and start the meeting at 8:20, and then we should be done at 8:35 for anybody that wants to wait around if we have any additional information. I don't think we'll have any additional information. So I'll ask for a motion to adjourn for 5 minutes.
So moved.
I have a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you all for coming this evening. Serious, Jeff, if you want to manage a shooting range up there, you know, it's kind of like a park. And maybe you can substitute running a park in Startup. I'm not getting a hard no.
I'll send an email to the county